I hereby call the meeting of the Finance Committee for Monday, May 4th, 2020, 7 p.m. to order. Good evening, counselors and invited guests. Before we start our meeting, I would like to read the statement regarding open meeting law. Out of respect for public health and in response to the governor's declared state of emergency, this meeting will be closed to the public, and interested parties can instead access the deliberations via live stream on youtube.com/user/TheBrocktonChannels/live. This meeting is being held in accordance with Governor Charlie Baker's signed open meeting law order dated March 12, 2020, which relieves a public body from the requirement of Section 20 of Chapter 30A that it conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, provided that the public body makes provision to ensure public access to the deliberations of the public body for interested members of the public through adequate alternative means. Thank you. So before we begin, I would like to do roll call attendance. Cardoso. Tina, roll call.
I'm here, sorry, wouldn't let me unmute.
It's okay. So Cruz.
Here.
Ianieri. Ianieri. Okay.
Here.
Farwell.
Here.
Lally.
Here.
Mendez.
Here.
Councilor Monahan isn't able to be with us tonight. He had was called into work. Nicastro.
Yes. Present.
Rodriguez.
Yes, here.
Thompson.
I'm present.
Thank you. 10 councilors present. Okay. Councilor Lally.
Madam Chair, I'd like to take a brief moment, to remember a former member of this body, George Cataldo. George was the counselor for Ward 6, and then he served as an at-large counselor as well. He was and still, very highly regarded in the area and in the city. He did a lot for the community. Even when he moved to Westport, he'd still drive here every week to volunteer in the mayor's office. He spent time at the Council on Aging. He's responsible for quite a lot of the things that really brought that extra special charm to the quality of life in Ward 6. So he's a very, very important Brocktonian, and we appreciate what he did for the community. So I'd ask that we take a moment of silence at this time.
Okay, thank you. Moment of silence for George Cataldo. May he rest in peace. I would also like to take a moment to recognize the city of Brockton lost another icon, a fashion icon that is, and that's Lee Rukus, who was the part owner of Lemar's House of Fashion on Main Street. She was part owner with her sister Margaret, and I remember their shop very well, and I know a lot of women in Brockton really enjoyed shopping there, and they brought a little taste of New York to the streets of Brockton. So I would like to extend our sympathies to her children, Tanya, Mark, and also her brother, Matt George, who served as our superintendent of schools, I believe, for about 10 years back in the between the 80s and 90s. So our sympathies go out to them. And Mark will be on the call with us as he's part of our meeting later in our agenda. But I just want to make sure that we send our condolences to the family. Counselors. So Mel, moving on with our agenda, can you read number 1? And Mel will be doing the roll call. We have to take all roll call votes. So Mel will be calling out the roll call after the item is, once we vote on them.
Number 1, ordered total transfer of $55,235.40
from DPW Highway Division Snow Removal to Finance Department Equipment Rent/Lease. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Lawrence Rowley, Commissioner of DPW.
Good evening, Mayor. Did you want to speak on this?
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I will let Mr. Clarkson speak, but I will tell you that what's before you tonight is a purchase price of the electric cars that the city has leased for the last 3 years. We did a cost analysis to see if it would make more financial sense to purchase those for the 55,000+ versus putting an RFP back out and leasing additional. And after doing our due diligence, it was determined that an acquisition by the city would make more sense. But I'll let Mr. Clarkson, who spent a lot of time on this, and also the DPW Commissioner opine if there's any questions. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the council. Happy to be here tonight. So when these vehicles were first acquired by the city through a lease, as I noted in the information provided earlier today, it was a process through the Uniform Procurement Act through Chapter 30B. And when the city went through that process, the Commonwealth, through the Green Communities Act, and I believe some other incentives, provided some pretty significant incentives. So the lease costs were actually significantly less than they might otherwise have been. And that was part of what led us to this recommendation, actually, to go through with the purchase. So the purchase price was established when the lease was executed a little over 3 years ago. And so we looked at either going out and purchasing additional vehicles or putting out a new RFP and acquiring new updated electric vehicles through a new lease. The conclusion that we came to was because of the significant incentives that the Commonwealth offered at the front end there are some incentives available now. You may remember just a little over a year ago, we got yet another one, but they're not to the level that they were. And in fact, the last time I checked, the Green Communities Act actually was not providing incentives for vehicles anymore. So I think we have the ability to continue to take advantage of those incentives by acquiring these cars through the agreed purchase price of about $5,500 per vehicle. It is for 10 vehicles. We did list them in a spreadsheet that I provided to you. They are used frequently by the different departments that have them assigned to them. So we think this is a prudent way to continue to provide transportation for our city employees. It's also obviously one that because the source is renewable, also underscores the city's commitment to reducing our carbon footprint, which is important. So for many reasons, we believe that that this is a fiscally sound and good public policy to move forward. I would like to note, just to reiterate something I said in an email to you over the weekend, the source of this transfer is our excess snow and ice. We still have about $1.5 million left in there due to the mild winter. And what I will be recommending to you at an upcoming meeting is that we transfer the remaining balance of that for now into our stabilization fund to provide us some cushion for what we expect to be challenging couple of years ahead, both fiscal years 21 and 22. And that will give us a little cushion until we understand and can really plan for whatever the impacts of the Commonwealth's budget will be. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And I do think this is good, sound policy for the city to move forward.
Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you. Counselor Falwell, you had a question?
Actually, Madam Chair, I wanted to thank Mr. Clarkson for providing detailed information to us after I sent an email to him over the weekend. I think it went out to all of you. These are low mileage vehicles, so I think this is a very prudent use of the money. And again, I thank Mr. Claxon for gathering it all together very quickly on a Monday for us. Thank you.
Thank you as well. I wanted to thank you as well, but I was muted. So thank you, Mr. Clarkson, for all the updates and the emails. We appreciate it. Councilor Cardoso, you had a question?
Hi, Troy. Thank you so much thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Troy, for all the information that you provided. It clarified a lot of the questions that I had. I just have a thought on future purchase to really look at the usage in the different departments to see if it, makes sense to purchase more vehicles or to, because it seems like the usage is kind of low in certain departments. So if you can kind of just speak to how we can, maybe move vehicles around to departments that are using them more or have more need for them.
Sure. So Councilor Farwell actually touched on that in one of the questions that he asked, and it's a very legitimate, I think, topic for discussion. We are in the middle of negotiations with all of the unions in town and have had some discussion during those contract negotiations about the use of public versus private vehicles. I have shared a professional opinion that I believe that that's something that can be achieved through the issuance of a policy. Right now it exists in some of the contracts. So I think it's a very legitimate issue for us to continue to take a look at and how public versus private vehicles are used to what frequency and what the cost implications are of there. So I think it's a great topic for us to explore in more detail.
Thank you. We also have Commissioner Rowley in the meeting with us. So if anybody had any questions for him. Councilor Cruz, you had a question?
Yes, I just thank you, Troy, for getting all the information together. But did I read it correctly this morning that these vehicles are not lettered City of Brockton?
So I know because I park where I park in the garage, is adjacent to where, not all, but where many of them are stored. And so I think because we, to this date, have not owned the vehicles, the practice has been when they're used, there are the magnetic signs that are placed on the vehicles to identify them as city vehicles. Obviously, if we do proceed and purchase them, we'll comply with the ordinance and make sure that they're all lettered. Like, obviously, Larry can.
Yeah, I think it's much better practice. Temporary signs are easily moved and can tend to maybe have somebody think that they can then use them outside of work time. I believe our ordinance calls for all city vehicles, other than police undercover vehicles, to be lettered. And I'd just like to make sure they are lettered in the future. So, and not just magnetic signs, but lettered. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, Councilor Cruz, we'll get those done. Like Troy said, I wanted to letter them when we got ours in DPW, but I was told no, because we don't own them. So we did have magnetic signs made up. And actually that came under Bill Carpenter's administration, that there were some cars riding around without signage on them at all. And he issued a order or a statement that he wanted all signage on all of them. So that's why most of them do have the signs now. But as soon as we purchase them, yeah, we'll get some gold leaf lettering on them. And they all do have a municipal blue plate on them.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, can you read the roll call, please?
Councilor Azak,
Yes.
Councilor Cardosa,
Yes.
Councilor Farwell,
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilor Mendez,
Yes.
Councilor Cruz,
Yes.
Councilor Ianieri,
Yes.
Councilor Nicastro,
Yes.
Councilor Thompson,
Yes.
Councilor Lally,
Yes.
all in favor.
The order goes back favorably to the full city council. Thank you. And number 2, Madam Clerk.
Ordered, acceptance of an anonymous donation to be used solely by the police department in its purchase of a K9 cruiser and related equipment in the amount of $46,000 from anonymous donor to the Brockton Police Department. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Mayor, did you want to speak on this?
Yeah, good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is an anonymous donation, very generous, 46,000 to Brockton PD, and it's earmarked and it's dedicated specifically for equipment for the K9 program. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Perfect. Any questions, councilors?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, please read the roll call.
Councilor Asak,
Yes.
Councilor Cardoso,
Yes.
Councilor Farwell,
Here.
Councilor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilor Mendez,
Yes.
Councilor Cruz,
Yes.
Councilor Ianieri,
Yes.
Councilor Nicastro,
Yes.
Councilor Thompson,
Yes.
Councilor Lally,
Yes.
all in favor.
The motion goes back favorably to the full city council. Thank you. Madam Clerk, number 3.
Ordered, transfer of $600 from finance purchase of services to finance in-state travel. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mayor again.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. What this is the CFO, Chief Financial Officer for the City of Brockton, attended the MMA conference, the Mass Municipal Conference in Boston, in his capacity as CFO for the City of Brockton. This is a reimbursement request for his hotel and parking. It does not include, and he made that clear to me, any type of food or beverages. It was strictly hotel and parking in Boston for the MMA conference that he attended.
Okay, Councilor Cruz, you have a question?
I didn't get a chance to look this up because my budget book is at City Hall. Do we have no money for in-state travel in your budget, Troy?
No, I guess let me double check it here just to make sure.
And I'm assuming we don't if we have to do a transfer.
So the budget for this year is $163, and that's just a carryover from previous years. I'm not sure what that amount has represented. 2019, it was 125, and this year it's $163, which doesn't get you that far.
No, it doesn't. I just, I don't like doing it backwards is all. We should make sure when we're doing the budget that there's a bit in there for in-state travel, because theoretically, this money is already spent. This is reimbursement. It's not the best way to, you're the finance person. It's not the best way to be doing things.
Agreed wholeheartedly, Counselor. And so we're still in the process of putting together the 2021 budget, but in the version of the 2021 budget that we put together before the pandemic, there was a request for a couple thousand in that line.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions, councilors?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
The motion's been made and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Councilor Asak,
Yes.
Councilor Cardoso,
Yes.
Councilor Farwell,
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilor Mendez,
Yes.
Councilor Cruz,
Yes.
Councilor Ianieri, Councilor Ianieri,
Yes.
Councilor Nicastro,
Yes.
Councilor Thompson,
Yes.
Councilor Lally,
Yes.
all in favor.
The order goes back favorably to the full city council. Madam Clerk, number 4.
Order to approve the sale of 12 parcels as described in Plot 16-27 Sprague Street, owned by the City of Brockton, for the development of a sports complex as proposed by the response request for proposals of New Heights Builders. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Tori Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Robert May, Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Councilors, we also have Mark Rukus from New Heights Builders on the in the meeting with us. So in case anybody has any questions, Councilor Lally, did you want to speak on this, or do you have any questions for the invited guests?
Madam Chair, I don't have any questions. I've been, working with them through the process. I do just want to say that this has my absolute full support since the beginning. This is a piece of property we're not really going to get any other use out of. Its original intent was to be used for another 190 single-family homes, which would have put a significant drain on the the schools in the area, as well as the public safety resources that we have. This is a property that's going to be bought for more than $250,000. It's going to pay, $100,000 more than that in taxes every year, and it's going to be a draw to the city in a really big way, and a draw to Montillo and the businesses around there. And I think that that's something that we really need. So I'd ask my colleagues for their support on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. And Councilors, does anybody have any questions or?
Madam Chairman.
Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just had a couple of questions regarding the land disposition agreement, which is acting as a purchase and sales agreement. And the first thing I wondered about, I noticed that on the first page of the agreement, it's not dated. All we know is that it was from 2018. I'm wondering what was the date it was signed. The signatures in the back are not dated either. Does anyone know?
Madam Chairman, if I could.
Yes, ma'am.
So just to kind of go back, when I was a member of your esteemed body, as you recall, there was an RFP put out and we all voted on it to sell the property to Mr. Rukas. And I see Mark on, and my condolences to you and your family, Mark. Your mom was a great person, and I'm sorry for your loss. At that time, the city solicitor's office was working to generate a deed. These parcels, Attorney Nicastro will understand under the title standards of Massachusetts general law, the city solicitor was working with Dan Vieira, who's a local attorney in Easton that represents Mr. Rukas in New Heights. This is a very complicated title matter, being that 12 parcels, some of them are irregular in shape. So Attorney Bridges is here. I asked Megan to join us if nobody objects. She's been working diligently with outside counsel, which is Coppola and Coppola, who really was brought on to help us when we have title challenging properties such as this. And so if there's no objections, I know Attorney Bridges is well versed in this. We've had many conversations about this. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. There's no objections. So Attorney Bridges, did you want to speak?
You're muted.
Thank you. In response to Councilor Nicastro's question, I don't know the answer about the date. I mean, I could only give an estimation that it was after the RFP was put out and after the bids were received, but before now. And I don't mean to be that, comical or anything, but I don't know what the date is.
Okay, the RFP was received in the clerk's office February 24th, 2016. The P&S agreement is just dated 2018. There are warranties and representations by the buyer in the land disposition agreement that are a few years old now. And so I'm just wondering, things like ability to do this financially and all that. And I'm just wondering, can those be restated? Can that information be updated and restated probably at your closing? I don't need it myself, but of course, we're putting restrictions in the deed that are limiting the development of this property to a sports complex, which is very wise, and I'm glad for that. But I just want to make sure that the buyer updates these warranties and representations at the time of closing so that we know that they're able to do this, to continue doing this. A lot can change between February of 2016 or even 2018 when this agreement was signed.
Okay. Counselor Lally, you had your hand up, and then Counselor Farwell. Counselor Lally, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say, I have, no objection to making sure that everyone's still on the same page. But I do just want to say that this developer has been with this project the entire way. And in 5 years, that's really putting anybody through the ringer. But the New Heights and Mr. Rukas, they've stayed on, and they've held their commitment to the area and to the city. So I really do think that I think that they've got no reason for us to call any doubt to them. And I do know that they are on the line, Mr. Rukas and Mr. May, and they might have something to say about it.
So, Mr. May, you have a statement that you'd like to make?
What I would like to say is, unfortunately, tonight our portal is down, and so I can't get into my desktop computer. But I can check the date and see when that document was scanned and saved. I believe it was 2018, just to make sure that we have a proper date on the document.
Okay, thank you, Mr. May. I know Counselor Farwell, did you have a question or?
Well, just a quick comment. If you look at the enclosure we received at the very top, I believe there is a code there, 2018-0829. So it appeared that August 29th was the date when these documents may have been put together. And I spoke with Mr. Rukas over the weekend, and he is absolutely committed to doing what needs to be done to make this sports complex a reality. He used to live in Brockton. He does not now, but as he said to me, Brockton is my blood. Brockton is my interest. Brockton is my commitment, and I'm really very pleased with that. And I also like the deed that has been presented, which has a number of restrictions. And number 7, for those who want to get into this policy wonk stuff, the deed is very restrictive. And presuming no future council decides to waive the provisions, this property will be used for a premier indoor-outdoor sports complex. It will not be, there'll be no material change in development for a period of 20 years from the date of closing, unless the city gives us prior written consent to such change. There'll be no transfer of title to a tax-exempt owner unless the city has given us prior written consent to such transfer, and the city may condition its consent upon the tax-exempt owners entering into a payment in lieu of taxes or a pilot agreement. And I think that really gives us a level of protection. If this is boilerplate language, shame on me for not noticing it before. But I think in this agreement, this really locks in where Mr. Rukas is going, what he wants to do, and protects the interests of the city so long as mayors and city councilors honor the deed restrictions. So I thank him for his commitment, and I thank Councilor Lally for all the work he's done in this. I think it started in his first term, and it's been with him ever since. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. And I know Counselor Thompson, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Being a new councilor, I was not with the council when this matter was originally being discussed and the plans for this area. I did have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Rukas over the weekend and he kindly addressed some of the questions I had. And he informed me of his dedication to this development, and really kind of made me feel comfortable about his involvement with this development and his willingness and desire to see it through to become successful for the city of Brockton. I also, with the documents sent to us over the weekend or prior to the weekend, mostly contract language with really no renderings of the project. So Mr. Roukis was kind enough to email me some renderings of the proposed site plan, some of the buildings, and the layout of the fields. And just for a review, reviewing these documents, it seems like a wonderful project in a great location, and really will be an asset to Brockton. So I want to thank Mr. Roukis for for his participation in this process, betting on Brockton, which I believe is a wise bet. And I also want to send my condolences to you, Mr. Roukis, for the loss of your mother. We're all praying for you and your family, sir.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
You're muted. Madam Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you, Council. I don't know what's going on with this button. Thank you. Councilor Castro, I know you have your hand up, but I do have some councilors that haven't asked questions yet before we come back to you. Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. Actually, first off, Mark, sorry if you got my note, but your mother was quite a lady, so sorry for your loss. It's the city's loss too. And actually, my only comment is on something Councilor Falwell said. He and I both have agreed in the past that hopefully other councils in the future won't make changes to deed restrictions that councils put in. But in this case, the last line of number 7, it worries me a little, and not because of our current mayor, but it actually takes the power away from the council. The last line of subsection 7, Council Falwell, says the consent of the city shall mean the consent of the mayor, which I'm a little surprised at because this is something that the council is giving its blessing to, that the mayor can make the change to it. I may, in the meantime, between now and next Monday night, try and get an opinion from our solicitor on whether that, how that works. But because it is the council transferring the property, I believe. But this is a project, and Councilor Thompson, this has been a long time coming. We've been working on this. I thank Mr. Roukis for sticking with it for so long, because it is going to be a great venue. My kids have now grown up. I'm out of the soccer every weekend, and but it's Mayor Sullivan's in those ages now, so I can't wait to get this done. To be honest with you, I thought we had transferred this property a long time ago, but I'm glad to see it done. But I will be just checking on that one line, Councilor, because again, Councilor Falwell, you and I agree on what we've seen a couple of attempts lately to change some deed restrictions that former councils put on, and I don't believe we should be doing that very easily. So thank you and good luck with the project, Mr. Roukis.
Councilors, any other questions before we go back to Councilor Castro? Oh, Councilor Castro, go ahead.
Thank you. I actually had a few more things. Thank you for coming back to me. And one of them was the issue that Councilor Cruz just raised about in number 7 on page 2 of the land disposition agreement, the consent of the city, meaning the consent of the mayor, since I believe the city council has the power to convey land of the city. So there was that one. And then underneath it in section E, time for performance, this says that the deadline for selling this property is September 30th, 2018. And I understand there were issues that were being addressed in the interim. I was not given an extension, a signed extension indicating that the closing date had been extended. I'd certainly like to see that. You gave me a contract to read. It didn't have a date on it or a deadline, a valid deadline. And so I am very interested in seeing, is this still a valid contract? Thank you. Oh, and I'm very sad about Lee Roukis's death, and my sincere condolences to Tanya and you, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, do you want to speak on this? Did you want?
Yeah, I could say that the question about the timeline and extension, I'm not sure, but some purchase and sales that I've seen over in the past, if there's a title issue there's an automatic extension. I don't know if you saw that in there. I don't know if it even is in there. My attorney has been dealing with Phil Nazarella at the time, and now he's dealing with the outside counsel that you guys brought in, and I didn't even know we had a vote again, to be honest with you. When I heard, I was surprised, but whatever you guys want to do, I'm all for it. If you want to change the mayor being the city to the city council, that I'm all for it. Whatever you want to do. As far as the timelines, that's something I have no idea if that was ever extended or not. Maybe Rob might know.
Okay. Thank you. Rob, did you want to speak on this?
We had not executed an extension. We kind of, once it went down to the law office to be actually executed, it kind of left our hands, and it wasn't until later that we found out that it had never been executed. And so, we're sorry that we didn't have an extension. I don't see why we couldn't get an extension from Mr. Rukas if that's the council's pleasure, but the deal is the deal. So, whatever the council's pleasure is.
Well, a contract for the sale of land must be in writing to be valid. And it's not valid if the performance date is not extended. So I really do think you should get an extension.
Would you like me to have my attorney send one to the law department?
Megan, do you want to speak on this, or what do you recommend?
I can just reach out to Dan tomorrow and ask him. I think we're everyone's operating with the likeness of mind about closing the deal. But we can, and the extension wouldn't be recorded either, along with the instruments that would support the conveyance. But we can still I'm sure that Dan would be fine with agreeing to the extension. They actually wanted to close, I think, April 21st. So I'm sure he'd be fine putting something in writing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
if I could just give another point of information. So when I took office, I too, like Councilor Cruz, thought this was long executed.
I'm right there with you.
There was verbiage in the council vote that we all took that said prior to the closing date, there needed to be a reaffirmation vote or something to that effect that Megan Bridges and I reviewed. So it was brought to Mr. Attorney Vieira's attention as well. This is more like dotting the i's and crossing the t's because of the vote of the council that I participated on, so that there would be no cloud on title once the title was recorded and it was conveyed and the money was forwarded to the city of Brockton.
Thank you. Councilors?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Counselor Asak,
Yes.
Counselor Cardoso,
Yes.
Counselor Farwell,
Yes.
Counselor Rodriguez,
Absolutely, yes.
Counselor Mendez,
Yes.
Counselor Cruz,
Yes.
Counselor Ianieri,
Absolutely, yes.
Counselor Nicastro,
Yes.
Counselor Thompson,
Yes.
Counselor Lally,
Yes, finally.
all in favor.
The motion goes back to the full city council favorably. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Rukas, for being here tonight. And wish you all the best. So Counselor Nicastro, did you have a question? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I hope that we can see a signed extension before our vote next week.
Sure.
Okay,
Okay.
said yes, so we'll work on that.
I'm literally emailing Dan right now.
Okay.
Thank you, Attorney Bridges, and thank you again, Mark. We appreciate it.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Madam Clerk, number 5.
Resolve, the mayor be invited to a meeting of the council to review the city's continuing response to the COVID-19 disease. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, John McGarry, Executive Director, Board of Health, Stephen Hook, Director of BEMA.
Thank you. Councilor Cruz, you had your hand up?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to make a motion. We take 5 and 6 together. They're essentially the same resolve, I believe.
Second.
We can,
Okay, so motion's been made to take them collectively and properly seconded. All those, we'll do a roll call, see who's in favor, or can we do just raise your hand to take them collectively? Okay, everybody's, no objections to taking them collectively? Nope. So Madam Clerk, please read number 6 as well.
Resolve, to provide an update and review of the city's ongoing efforts to protect the health, welfare, and safety of our residents related to this COVID-19 disease. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, John McGarry, Executive Director, Board of Health, Stephen Hook, Director of BEMA, Megan Bridges, Assistant City Solicitor, Evelyn LeBrun, Head Nurse.
Thank you. So we have all the invited guests here. Thank you for being here tonight. And I know Councilor Castro and Falwell filed the first resolve. So if you want, we'll start out with Councilor Castro first for questions.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. And I just wanted to forewarn you, I have a few questions. Okay. And answer as you wish, or whoever wants to step up on each one is fine with it. But I'd like you to describe the crises of COVID-19 as it's affecting Brockton. And I'd also like you to talk about who's in charge as we fight this terrible battle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and councilors. And I want to thank the councilors that filed both these resolves. Extremely important as we work in collaboration. I'll answer it quite honestly by giving you again a status update like I do every day. 159 deaths. 159 people have died. Residents here in the city of Brockton due to this life and death pandemic. 2,560 current active cases of residents that are dealing with this, positive current cases. And today I got the news that we surpassed 3,085 residents is the total count. It's been a collaborative approach, Councilor Castro, and I want to thank, first of all, Steve Hook from BEMA. I want to thank John McGarry. John stepped up when I asked him to. We did not understand at that time the true magnitude of this virus that's killing Brockton people. It's a collaboration where we only have one health nurse, Evelyn LeBrun, and she's on. Superintendent of the schools, Mike Thomas, has been awesome. He let us get 8 public school nurses to help us during this. Lieutenant Governor Polito has reached out to me on a regular basis. We would not be where we are right now without the help of Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor in MEMA and DPH. So as mayor, I have coordinated this effort with my dedicated membership of the team, right? In terms of the state delegation, every Tuesday I speak to Claire and Jerry and Michelle and Mike. And I will say that 3 times a week, we are on Monday, Wednesday, Friday calls with all the hospitals in Brockton, Sue Joss Neighborhood Health Center, in terms of Father Bill's Mainspring and High Point. And 4 times a week, I'm on regional calls with the mayors led by Mayor Walsh in Boston. Sunday nights, 8 to 10 p.m. and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 p.m. So there's no one single person. I know that the city council and the school committee has been awesome working with me. And I know Congressman Steve Lynch and U.S. Senator Ed Markey has been extremely helpful. So if we look at where we are right now, I have to say, in my humble opinion, we would be higher numbers, more loss of life if we didn't jump on this when we did jump on this. But this is a struggle that continues. Those numbers every day at 4 o'clock, when John McGarry gives me those numbers, they're increasing. And it's a really, really tragic situation right now. and we're working to try to minimize and mitigate this and adhering to all the health standards that have been promulgated by the Commonwealth and by the locality.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm interested to know, how much time do each of you spend each day, Monday through Friday, on COVID-19 related efforts?
Again, I can speak for myself, Counselor. I'm not sleeping at night. I'm dealing with this on a regular basis. When I hear the horrible stories of people dying in the nursing homes and people that are on the front line at the hospitals, it as a human being, and I want to thank Tina. She asked me a couple of weeks ago, "How's it going, Bob? How you doing?" And that's just a human touch right there, and I appreciate that. She didn't ask me because she's a nurse. She asked me as a human being, "How you doing?" None of us, when we took that oath on January 6th, would expect that in the year 2020 we'd have a pandemic worldwide, but it hit home here, right? Number 2 in the Commonwealth, and it wasn't a ranking that we were looking for or wanted, quite honestly. So I could tell you that government continues. I'm at City Hall every single day. I know there's someone on social media that says the mayor's not there, and that's BS, and I'll be very blunt about that. I'm there every day, and I'm there with my team, my chief of staff, Kerry Richards. John McGarry is working more hours than he ever thought he would, and Steve Hook, it's a part-time job, but he's there and he's working. So I can't speak for Steve and John. I'll let them, and Evelyn, but thank God for all of them, because we would be worse off without these dedicated professionals.
Mr. McGarry, do you want to speak on this? Or?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On March 13th, I was voted in an emergency session of the Board of Health, and I have not had a day off since then. When I said yes to the mayor over a cup of coffee, we thought we were going to be dealing with issues, and he had asked if I'd be willing to step up. I have been a registered nurse since 1979. I have held multiple jobs, and I have never worked as hard as I have in my life as I have for the last 2 months. This terrible, horrible virus that is out there that you can have and never show symptoms of, and at that time you are now infecting multiple people. I just never thought in my lifetime that I would ever be dealing with anything like this. This is truly a terror on our population throughout the entire world. And we as a team and with the backing of all our political alliances have been fighting every minute of every day. While I'm working at home, I'm spending most of my time doing just what I'm doing right now in conference meetings with the Department of Public Health, with the group from Neighborhood Health, which has created a great consortium, and we're working through Partners in Health in the tracking. And I thank the lucky stars that we have the public health nurse, which is one. It's a shame that we only have one in a city of 100,000. But Evelyn has done yeoman's work. The woman who is on with us tonight puts in a minimum of 16 to 18 hours a day, helping to take care of the citizens of this city. So you have, ladies and gentlemen, a group of very dedicated people, both inside of Brockton and outside, that truly care about the residents of this city.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGarry. Steve, you're on this, you're on both results. Did you want to speak? Did you want to answer Councilor Castro or?
Absolutely. Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members. So, late January, early February, the mayor and I got together and we started talking about this. We knew it was coming. We had a conversation. We talked about the plans that we had in place. We talked about our emergency dispensing plan. We talked about states of emergencies. We talked about the homeless. We talked about a number of things in preparation for this. So we started early on. I had, just like John and the mayor, this has been a 24/7, everyday job. So we are managing the logistics. This is really a public health emergency, right? FEMA is managing the logistics of this. getting supplies, getting PPE to our first responders, making sure that Mainspring gets what they need, setting up the testing center, the testing site. So it has been a 24/7 job for the last couple of months. Now, the mayor and John and I speak every single day, all hours of the day and night, 9, 10 o'clock at night, we'll speak on things that are going on. So,
Thank you.
Council, does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. So your days are long, and that includes weekends too, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you for all you're doing, gentlemen. And we also have Evelyn on the line. I know she's part of the next resolve, but I'm Counselor Nicastro. I have counselors that have questions. Did you want to continue or?
One more.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Does the city have an adequate amount of PPE available?
So I can speak of that, Steve Hook from Emergency Management. So we've been very successful working with our state partners on PPE. So early on, MEMA managed the PPE, and then they divided it up where healthcare providers and EMS got their PPE from the Department of Public Health. And we managed it for first responders. To date, we've gotten, the city of Brockton has received over 50,000 pieces of PPE delivered, picked up by BEMA, and we've distributed that PPE to over 25, 26, 27 city departments and other organizations in the city. Early on, we decided that if the Brockton Hospital needed PPE desperately and they couldn't wait for DPH and we had it, we would deliver it, and we have. And we did the same for Mainspring, Bay Point, several nursing homes. The fire department's gotten PPE, almost every city department from the police department, fire department, down to the council on aging, to the property management, property management has gotten PPE from us. And that is an ongoing process. Every single day, we're picking up or delivering PPE.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Counselor Cardoso.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi,
Council.
John, Mayor Steve, thank you all for being here tonight, and I appreciate all that you're doing. As a nurse, John, I'm with you. This is like 24 hours, 7 days a week, on top of being a nurse, being a mom, being a counselor. It hasn't been easy for me either. When I reached out to you and to Steve and to the mayor, I want you guys to know it's not that I am questioning what you're doing. I sympathize, I'm living it. I'm not finger pointing. I am just wanting to get some information to the public. So I hope that you all understand that. So the constituents that I have been coming to me with concerns about PPE. I think, Steve, when we talked, there was a system of requesting PPE from the different facilities. My question for you is, have folks been utilizing that system to make sure that they have enough equipment, especially in the nursing homes? Because I'm still getting complaints from workers that they don't have the proper equipment, that they're using masks for up to 7 days. Can you speak to how many facilities in the city have accessed this public, procurement process where they're inquiring, they're applying for the PPE that they need to make sure that they're safe and that the staff is safe and the patients are safe?
Absolutely. Hi, Counselor. So just to be clear, there is no procurement. The PPE is free from the state, right? So if you're a nursing home, you request your PPE through the Department of Public Health. We don't see that. Emergency management doesn't see it. It doesn't come into our system. We don't even know they're requesting it. So to give you a number of nursing homes who have requested PPE, I don't have it. But I will tell you that I have received calls from nursing homes that say, hey, we haven't received any, this was early on, we haven't received anything from DPH. Can you help us out? And we have done that. Like I said, if we have PPE here, we're going to make sure that everybody gets what they need. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any issues obtaining PPE from DPH or MEMA. I know that the city of Brockton first responders and BEMA has never run out of PPE. We've gotten everything we've asked for in a timely manner. And we've never run out. Everybody has received what they needed.
Do you know who would have that information as far as, you know, are the nursing homes doing what they need to do to get the necessary equipment?
I would say Department of Public Health, the command center of the Department of Public Health handles that.
Council, I can also give you some information, and I've shared this before. I have standing calls twice a week, and it's been for 2 months now with all the nursing homes in the city of Brockton. And unfortunately, it started with loss of life of Guardian, and then went to St. Joseph's Manor, and then West Acres Alliance, and then Bay Point. Village Rest Home on West Chestnut Street next to Council Ianieri is the only establishment that has not been impacted with a positive case. There's only 16 residents there. I will tell you that much like my calls with the hospitals and with the banks and with the businesses and with the clergy, what I said on day one is this is about people, saving people's lives. I don't care about competition or who this nursing home goes against this nursing home. There's been a great sharing of best practices and information. And as what the BEMA representative just said, what Mr. Hook just said is the protocol that had already been promulgated from the state was that a municipality such as the city of Brockton would get PPEs from MEMA. I will tell you that Congressman Lynch also let us get quite a few supplies of the N95 and the KN95 masks that we put in orders. The rest homes and the assisted daycare facilities and the actual nursing facilities had originally been low on PPEs. And I told Steve that even though they're supposed to get it from DPH, if they need it, we're going to give it. If we have extras, we will. And we did do that. They have never since that time said that they're low. I will tell you, though, that it's been an emotional toll on those calls. It's not just the clientele or the residents that are passing away and getting sick. That's an emotional toll. It's the actual employees of those establishments that have to leave and isolate. The successes when they come back. But I'll tell you, in Jeff's ward on Beaumont, Brockton over there, I mean, every time someone comes back, goes back to work, the 2 others or 3 others go out. So, it's all about sharing information and getting the message out throughout the city of Brockton. And I'm happy, I'll be on another call tomorrow at 11 o'clock with the nursing home. So I'm happy to verify that again, and I can send an email out to everybody to get the most recent updates from them.
Okay, and so Mayor, the reason I asked that question is because I know that there's a lot that we feel like we don't have control over when it comes to nursing homes by way of laws and all of that we're not, they're regulated by the state and not by us. But I feel like in this case where we have this emergency situation, we need to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to protect our citizens who live in their facilities and work in their facilities. So that's why I asked that question. And that question gets asked a lot of us counselors as far as PPE. The other question as far as testing, maybe Steve can answer this as far as the nursing homes, making sure that they're getting everyone tested as far as their employees.
I can try to answer it. John might be better to answer it, but I know that the National Guard has been in the city on several occasions testing nursing homes. I'm not sure if it's just patients or employees as well.
I can answer that because we talked about it just the other day with the nursing home. So the Guard did come in at the request of each establishment. Governor Baker issued an executive order just recently that staff and residents, clientele would be tested. I was on a call today with all the hospitals. Sue Joss, executive director of Neighborhood Health Center, mentioned to me that she was going to be on a Zoom later on this afternoon, that they were going to do increased testing of patients and employees at all the local nursing homes, because that's the tsunami that Brockton's been facing. In terms of that loss, if we read the Enterprise, a high statistical percentage of the deaths were in the nursing homes. So Steve hit it on the head. It was at the beck and call of the nursing facilities that the National Guard came in. I had a conversation with Karen Polito weeks ago, and she said, whatever you need, you'll get. And that has rung true. The increased testing, not just at the nursing homes, but through Quest and through the neighborhood health center. Again, we know what happened today at Brockton High School, right? We have an on-test external outside testing facility with Signature in Brockton. So the testing capability and the contact tracing services that Governor Baker has been able to bring to Brockton is a game changer and is helping. But I share the same sentiments as you, Counselor. I mean, I hear it. I know the councils hear it. I know school committee hears it. I know the state delegation hears it. But I will be very frank that the executive directors at all the nursing homes have been extremely open, willing to share information. It's not cloak and dagger, but at the end of the day, DPH does monitor them, license them. But I think they have a real understanding of the great impact that is happening in their facilities and throughout the city of Brockton.
Okay, and I think other councils have questions about data collection for John. I have similar questions, but I'll let the other councilors ask. My last thing on the testing at Brockton High School, this testing is for Brockton Neighborhood Health Center, Mayor, patients of Brockton Neighborhood Health Center.
So what it is, Counselor, it's actually, it's a collaborative approach, which is awesome. It's Neighborhood Health Center, it's Signature Brockton Hospital, and the criteria of testing is any essential worker in the city of Brockton, any essential worker that wants to get tested can get tested. Anybody that has symptoms of the COVID-19 or anyone that has been exposed, there's a hotline number, which is, I'll give it to you. It's 844-483-7819. Again, 844-483-7819. It's at 470 Forest Ave, which again is Brockton High. Steve Hook through BEMA and MEMA and DPH and a woman named Leslie Darcy put the tents up last week. Brockton Hospital had one of their advisors help us facilitate that. Brockton Police and school police are monitoring that. Mike Thomas and Chartwells is providing food to the staff. People have to call first. If they call that number, they'll pre-register. It's a drive-up facility. I was there today to look at it. One tent is dedicated to Signature Brockton Hospital. The other tent is dedicated to the Neighborhood Health Center. And again, it's through the increased testing from Quest that we're able to do this.
But the question is, folks who don't have a PCP, they don't have.
They just have to call that number, Counselor.
Okay, no health insurance, or they don't have a PCP at Brockton Neighborhood. Can they still call this number for help?
Yes, as long as they're either an essential worker in Brockton or someone exposed or someone that has symptoms.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
And the hours are 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, Counselor.
Thank you. I think I'll let other councilors go.
Counselor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good evening, everyone. And I want to thank the mayor and all the invited guests for taking time tonight to discuss the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I really wanted to preface my comments with an understanding that I know that everybody in this meeting cares deeply about the health and safety of the residents of Brockton. What I'm trying to learn today is what information is the city of Brockton collecting from our city's medical providers regarding positive COVID-19 cases? How is the city using this information to prevent further death and the spread of COVID-19? And can the city share certain information with the residents of Brockton to better inform them on how to protect themselves and their families from COVID-19? It's my belief that the more information shared with the public, the better. So my first question is to whoever would like to respond. Is the city of Brockton collecting complete demographic data on all reported positive COVID-19 cases in our city from the medical providers and the laboratories?
I can answer that, Counselor. And again, I want to thank you, Jeff and Rita and Tina for sending a letter. We did our first health equity task group last week, Zoom. We have another one at 3:30 on Wednesday. I have gotten not a lot of responses of people that want to be on subcommittees of that. But to answer your question, Counselor, is HIPAA was extended under the law, under Mass General Law. HIPAA was extended, but it was only extended to the point where the city of Brockton or any municipality is informed the following every day. And John McGarry, in his capacity, gets this through DPH. We get numbers driven. It is not specific to an age, a sex, ethnic background, nationality. It's numbers driven of loss of life and positive cases. The caveat there, though, is we also get house address if it's a hot house. And what that means, counselors, is if there's someone in a residence that actually is positive COVID, Mr. McGarry is allowed to get that address and share that with Brockton PD and Brockton Fire. Not the names, just the address, so that if someone has to report that, they know it's a hot house. In terms of demographics, that's something that we're going to have to do together. We talked about this on Thursday. I'm up for any help I can get, and I know all you want to help. We need a systemic change. Right now, we don't have that information. People have said to me, you know, how many Caucasians or Cape Verdes or Haitians have come down there with this? How many older people, how many younger people? That's not shared right now with us. What is shared is strictly numbers driven in terms of how many people have passed away that are Brockton residents and how many people that are Brockton residents have come down with this nasty virus. We are working with our state delegation. I have a call every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And again, that's going to be part of the task force. Jerry Cassidy signed on today and Michelle Dubois. John McGarry, I know you deal with DPH on this every day. Maybe you can give a little more info to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For those of you that know me, you know, I ran the elections for the 18 years. And if you dealt with me then, you would have heard this story. The city is not the keeper of records. The state is the keeper of records. And it's no different now as it was then. The records that are being judged and come through the Board of Health is actually an arm of the Department of Public Health, the State Department of Public Health. They are the keeper of the information. The database that is created and generated and that the nurses that are working on goes to DPH. Under HIPAA, all we're allowed to do currently is to give the addresses of the hot houses, of houses that have positive cases in them to help protect the first responders. And that was not easy to get. It took approximately a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, to get the governor to cover the public health providers to be able to give that out so that we would not be in violation of HIPAA. The day's going to come eventually, maybe through the work that the mayor and the ad hoc committee is going to do to get the governor to let the state loosen up some more. But at this state, we do not have the information that is being asked for, has been asked for, and and I'm being very honest with you. As much as I love my city, I am not putting myself into a position where I would be in violation of HIPAA.
Well, I thank you for that. So what I'm just a little confused about is I've looked into some of these issues myself. And from my reading of the Mass General Law, the Board of Health should be keeping a record. Well, first of all, that the Mass General Law states and the CMR, the Code of Massachusetts Regulations, also states that the medical providers and laboratories should be providing this information directly to the Board of Health. Now, on March 10th, the governor put out an executive order stating that the medical providers are to be collecting this demographic data when it comes to the COVID-19 epidemic. So the law states clearly, and I'd be willing to talk to Attorney Bridges on this and maybe have further discussions offline. But the Mass General Law is clear, as is the CMR, that the medical providers and laboratories in these public health crises, and coronavirus is mentioned as a specific disease mentioned in a public health crisis, that the medical providers and laboratories should be providing full demographic information to our local boards of health. It is there that this information is uploaded into the Maven database, in which DPH then collects this information. Maybe Attorney Bridges, have you, well, I would say then secondly, I also researched HIPAA. And Mr. Mayor, if at all possible, if you could direct me to that aspect of HIPAA that prevents us from gathering this information or even sharing this information, because from my reading of HIPAA, the city government is not a covered entity under HIPAA. The only time a city entity is covered under HIPAA is if we ourselves are conducting some sort of clinic and we are the medical provider to the public at large. So again, I would like to understand, if we're not collecting this data, why aren't we? Because the Mass General laws and the Code of Massachusetts regulations actually require that the Department of Health is collecting this information.
Council, I have a 2 o'clock call tomorrow with Claire Crow, Dubois, Jerry Cassidy, and Mike Brady. I'm happy to bring that up. I'm just telling you, Jeff, what DPH has told John McGarry, who's the health officer for the city of Brockton. We're in a pandemic. This is what they've told us. If they've misstated, then we can go after them in a collaborative manner. You're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. We have Attorney Bridges, Shannon Resnick, but I'm just telling you what the state has told the city of Brockton since day one of this pandemic. That's what they've told us.
Well,
Attorney Bridges, do you want to answer at all? I know Councilor Thompson directed a question, but.
Sure. So the only thing, I'm happy to talk offline about what Councilor Thompson thinks the obligations of the Board of Health are. Certainly, the only thing I can offer on that point is we don't control the dissemination of information from the healthcare providers. So the city could not, and I mean, I'm not over there with John McGarry and Evelyn, but I understand that we're not receiving our positive case information directly from healthcare providers. We're receiving that information from DPH. So everything that we are getting is filtered from DPH. And, you know, the rules and regulations might exist out there, but I think that they were written relative to TB tracing, for example, TB testing, where demographic information is easy to obtain because the number of cases is not exponential. I'm not saying that we shouldn't get the information or that maybe we shouldn't figure out a way to obtain it, but I think the problem of obtaining the demographic information is much bigger than the city or municipality can tackle. Whenever it's not the entity where the information is originating. On the HIPAA inquiry, it's very complicated. Whether or not the city is a HIPAA covered entity is a question that's being pondered by the municipal bar. And I think the standard is whether or not the municipality transmits information that would be private healthcare related information. That's what makes someone a HIPAA covered entity. For the most part, I'd agree with you. We're not HIPAA covered. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other certain privacy considerations that have to be acknowledged and considered when sharing anyone's personal information.
I understand.
So in terms, you know, the demographics, please, John or Evelyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that every piece of information they get on a positive case comes from DPH. John?
Well, I'd say John answered that question. If Nurse LeBrum, since I believe she's been designated as the point person on data collection or information collection, Nurse LeBrum, can you confirm or not from the collection of this data?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We've been receiving all our cases from the state. The Quest, all the sites send all the information to the state, and we receive them from Maven. And that's when we start doing our tracing, calling people, find out how they doing, their contacts, sending them a packet information regarding isolation and quarantine. But all our information are coming from Maven.
Okay, understood. I appreciate that. Again, we are currently in a public health crisis. I believe our local boards of health have a role to play in collecting the information, and my reading of the CMR allows for that, not just for TB, but specifically mentioned for novel coronaviruses. But again, we can talk offline about, number one, our requirement to collect this data, and also our ability in these types of public health crises to share the data. The Mass General Law does allow for a local board of health to put out public notice of areas in the city in which they deem are clusters or outbreaks of the disease. So let me ask, is the city, because you shared that address information is being collected, and I know that information is being shared with our fire department and other first responders as a hothouse, as the mayor mentioned. So is the city able, with that information, to identify hotspots within Brockton where there are clusters of outbreak of COVID-19?
Clusters are reported to the state. The state actually through Maven notifies, if we'll either notify them or they'll notify us of a cluster. The information that we have is not kept. It is to be, part of it can be kept no longer according to what is out there than a number of days. It is to be given to the first responders. But clusters are kept track of through the Maven process.
So has the city identified clusters in Brockton?
Yes, we have in the past.
Yes.
So has, for instance, they've been, that's what you find at a nursing home. That's what you find at the VA. That's what you find. And those come through us. Either Evelyn picks up on it or one of the nurses does, or the Maven notifies us of a cluster and then gives it to the city to do the follow-up.
All right. Have we identified any clusters in residential neighborhoods?
Evelyn, I'd have to ask you if we've had any pickups on those.
Yes, we got some from group homes like Bemsey.
Okay. And then can you explain what is our response when an area like that is identified?
Usually when we identify a cluster, the DPH create the cluster for us. So you assign a number for each cluster. So we got, for example, we got the VA, we got 2 clusters in the VA. We got all the nursing home, they got different kind of clusters. So they assign their numbers. So all their employees, all their residents, they're part of this cluster. So we follow them. We follow only the employees, but not the resident. The residents are being followed by the nursing home. So we call the employees, get their contacts, get all the information about where have they been, if they've been in contact with someone that was positive. So from there, we educate them, we send them information regarding isolation and quarantine that they can share with their family, share with their the person that been in contact with them, so that we can minimize the spreading of the disease.
Now, would the Board of Health or the city be willing to develop a heat map showing these clusters with the public?
Yeah, Council, you brought up this point. I thought it was brilliant, and I even gave you credit for that the other day. I mean, yeah, I mean, right now, our whole focus is trying to save lives. So any mechanism that we can do. Do I find it problematic that the state is erring on non-disclosure during a pandemic? I do. I know that on the federal level, Congresswoman Presley is trying to get the feds to agree to that, to give the disclosure. Absolutely, Jeff, if you want to help us on that, I welcome the help. You know, I know that we're short-staffed. The fact that Evelyn is working yeoman's hours, and thank God for the 8 nurses. But really, it comes down to working together. The key word is together. I keep saying it. I said it on January 6th when none of us expected this pandemic. If we can create something that's going to help, I'll be very blunt. There's going to be a second surge. That's a fact. It's going to happen. We need to minimize the second surge. But right now, we need to make sure that loss of life ceases and that the numbers either decrease or stop. So absolutely, whatever we can do, and I'll work with you on that. I said that Thursday, and I'm thankful that you and Tina and Rita want to do the task force, and Shirley was on, and anybody and everybody, I'll take.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. And kind of piggybacking on that, another thing we discussed on that meeting was the Board of Health's ability to produce a bell curve diagram to help chart the progress of COVID-19 in our city. And as I said before, I'm sure one of our high school math teachers could help out with this, because I don't know if we'll be able to identify a second surge if we don't chart it out to be able to see when this current surge is reducing. Because everything we want to do right now to camp out COVID-19 is because ultimately we need to reopen our city and to provide relief to our small businesses in Brockton, to get them back up and running. So, you know, people can get back to work, and the financial hit our city's taking won't be as pronounced. Two last questions.
Okay, just because we have a line of counselors who want to ask questions. So,
then if there's any time for my 2 last questions after all city councilors have spoken, I'd love a second chance. So
sure, we'll give them that way. Everybody gets a chance to ask their questions. I'll come back to you, and I know Tina as well. Now, Councilor Falwell, you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess just a general question to Mr. Hook and Mr. Mayor and to Mr. McGarry. Regardless of the demographics, everything we do is designed to protect and enhance the life of everyone in the city. Is that a fair statement? So even if we broke down things
100%,
into specific demographics, we would still, we operate on the assumption that whatever we do is to benefit everyone in the city.
Correct.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, now the next question I have, and maybe I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but my concern with, if we were at the local level to put too much demographical information together and release it to the press or to the public, I would not want a group to be identified as unfortunately being a hotbed of infection. And then, because there are people out there who are prejudiced, they turn around and they blame that group as, oh, you're the reason why we can't open up. You're the reason why we don't have high school graduation. It's because of you, my business is closed. So I'm just concerned, and whatever you folks do, I deeply appreciate all of your work, but whatever you do, I hope you'll look at the negatives or the potential negatives as well as the positives, because there are some people out there who would be, shall we say, prejudiced against a group if they thought that they were contributing to significant COVID-19 cases. And whatever your response is, if you think I'm out of line, let me know. I don't mind, but that's my concern. I'll start with Mr. McGarry.
Councilor, that's one of the reasons why the state was not initially giving out.
John, we're having a hard time hearing you. I don't know.
I was going to say that's really hard to hear, Mr. McGarry.
Well, all right, I'm on top of my computer now. Can you hear me?
That's
you
a
hear
little better, yes.
All right. So that is why what Councilor Farwell just stated is why the state initially would not give out any kind of numbers unless a town had a certain population. Was just for that, for discrimination against a person who may be positive. So it is a consideration, and it's one that the state has taken seriously. So, you know, any agreements or any permissions that are garnered to provide information, it always has to be couched in the fact that you cannot out people. So just keep that in mind when these policies are being developed.
All right, my next question is, and I guess, John or Mr. Mayor, it is accurate to say that we have no role in supervising assisted living centers, nursing homes, or long-term care facilities, correct?
Yes, Counselor, it's again, that most of them are private facilities. They are licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through DPH. The municipality, meaning Brockton, does not have oversight on those. I will tell you, when I declared a local emergency, I sent a letter to all the facilities. I spoke to all the facilities. It continues twice. I said twice a week with other nursing homes, but they're not licensed by the city of Brockton. They are licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
So we have no right to mandate training for their employees or how they equip their facilities. I mean, we've got to hope that they're professional and that they will live up to the requirements that have been put in place by DPH.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we do have the ability, of course, fire department can go in and check the sprinkler systems and carbon monoxide and all that stuff. And again, Board of Health can go in if there's any complaints in terms of neglect or inspect the kitchens and like, but I don't have any authority as the mayor of Brockton to mandate training at a private facility.
All right, and then just on this line of questioning, and I have one other, with respect to the statistics, it's a voluntary basis what they give you, but it's mandatory what the state requires at this point. Is that correct? In other words, you, Mr. Mayor, you've built a relationship with a lot of these facilities, so they share daily information with you. But in fact, it's the state who can require them periodically to transmit data, not the city. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's accurate. I mean, again, my calls with the nursing homes, rest homes, assisted daycare, hospitals, neighborhood health center, Father Bill's, they do share information with me. I asked them, and they do that. But again, they're not mandated to do that. But they do that out of abundance of caution and to provide information that we can utilize to protect the general welfare of the city of Brockton.
Okay, I know a lot of people have some suggestions, and I don't mean just counselors, but there was no book to open. There was no, Barnes and Noble, how to behave in a pandemic as a public official. And so suffice to say, we have done some great things. We've got some areas we can do better. We're going to learn as we go along. Are we already preparing for the next wave in terms of supply chain issues, stockpiling supplies, and looking at how it will affect city government?
Yes, Council. I had indicated, of course, every Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock, I have a department head meeting, and John and Mel and Troy and Steve Hook, and I don't know if anybody else, we have Karen Fisher from Law that gets on. And, I expressed to them, this is a wake up call, and we are stockpiling. At the end of every budget cycle, we're going to make sure that we spend money to keep stocking and stocking and stocking, because we don't know what next year is going to bring. And I will tell you, we need to continue to work together as a community to get through this and also prepare for the second surge, whatever that means. It's yet to be determined. But again, I think you hit it on the head. There was no planning for this. There was no book on this. I will tell you, though, that my wife, being medically trained, hadn't gone to medical school. She told me about this when it was still in China and Italy before it came to the North American shores. And I did have a meeting in the GAR room and Steve Hook was talking about initial discussions. So we were planning, as I said at that first meeting, we have to plan worst case scenario to get the best case scenario. And unfortunately, worst case scenario is coming true to this day, Counselor.
All right, next to last question, and we haven't touched upon this, and I don't expect specifics tonight, but budget-wise, FY21, the state and the city are going to be faced with some real serious challenges. You're already into that, I assume. I just want counselors to begin to understand that we, in addition to the health issues that are ahead of us, we've got some very serious financial challenges ahead of us from what I'm reading. And I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Sure, absolutely, Counselor. So when we were in the city council chambers, God, many months ago, I guess now, Troy Clarkson and I came before you and I told you that it was going to be an earlier budget. It was going to be streamlined, much more business friendly. The actual books we were going to get were going to be much more informative, talking about summaries and goals and successes and what was achieved. That was when we had the Student Opportunity Act of $21 million in the city council, the school committee, and I chair the school committee. We voted to hire 93 new teachers and paraprofessionals in the classroom. Everything looked golden. The bubble burst quickly. I will tell you the money that was projected coming out of Beacon Hill to the city of Brockton is not there now. I'll be very blunt, as I say to the department heads. Everything is on the table from furloughs to layoffs. We're not there right now, but I'll tell you, we're looking at everything. I meet every single week by Zoom with Troy and Jay Condon, who is still a consultant for the city, and Karen Preval and Kerry Richards, my chief of staff. The 1/12 of a budget is allowable under Mass General Law. We need to look at that. Every Sunday night from 8 to 10 o'clock, Marty Walsh leads 13 of us, from town managers to mayors. And, I will tell you, last night, Kim Driscoll, a mayor in Salem, was talking about maybe a 20% reduction in local aid. My call tomorrow with the delegation and Troy will also include Superintendent Mike Thomas and Aldo Petronio, because we need to try to get a sense from the reps and the senator on what's going to come out of Beacon Hill. But let's not be naive. The budget that we're going to have now is drastically different than what we proposed. If this pandemic hadn't hit us, Counselor, we'd probably be getting the books to you within the next week or so. That's off the table. And how we're going to do it is yet to be determined. But I will tell you that I put a hiring freeze in weeks ago. I put in discretionary spending, executive order ceased weeks ago. And we have to think outside the box in terms of cost containment and fiscal responsibility. A lot of the capital projects that we were thinking about put on hold. Remember, I came before you and talked about school buses and how we're going to purchase school buses to eventually, over 10 to 12 years, have our own fleet. Made sense. Superintendent and I have nixed that for right now. It doesn't work. We'll get through this year's budget. I would think we'll get through next year's budget. 2 years from now is to be determined. Hotel, motel, and meals tax are decimated. Lottery funds are decimated. So if I gave you a cherry sheet right now, it'd be a lot different than what we expected, Council, and that's just the reality.
All right, I'm just going to close because other councilors want to speak.
Okay,
And just
thank
say,
you, Counselor.
Go ahead.
You all set? Okay, just because I have a line. So just to let everybody know, I'm going by order of who raises their hand up first. So next we have Counselor Cruz. You have to unmute, Counselor.
Thank you.
There you
A
go.
lot of my questions has been asked and answered, but I do want to get back a little bit of what Jeff Thompson was talking about. Unfortunately, and John McGarry and I have had some of these conversations, the state's controlling everything but wants the city to do all the field work. Is the state sending people out to the nursing homes to make sure they're quarantining sick people, or are they just taking their word for it?
Counselor, from meetings that I've had with the state, they do have people that are going out and helping. I don't know how often they're doing that or how much follow-up. I do know that when it came to the testing, they did multiple rounds with several of the nursing homes in the city. The guard was out here initially with most nursing homes, and then about 2 weeks later, they came back and re-hit a couple of those nursing homes. So they are doing follow-up with them.
Now, and then I guess this is for your nurse, Evelyn, but so when the employees are, and I think kind of in line with what Councilor Falwell was talking about, but also Councilor Cardoso, and I've heard this. Unfortunately, the employees at the nursing homes are some of the worst paid, lowest financial strata employees in the state. When they get sick, Evelyn, if they get tested positive, is there any way that we know that they're going home and quarantining? Or are they living in an apartment with 4 other people and that is what it is?
Usually when we get a case about a employee from a nursing home, we call them to find out how they're living, how many people are living in the house. And we tell them that they're supposed to stay in quarantine, in isolation from everybody in the house. But sometimes it's difficult because we can find 9 people in the house, 1 bathroom. So how are they going to do that? So we have to wait. So we have to wait to give them the information, teach them about how they should clean after themselves after they use the bathroom. And their family will be starting quarantine after themselves, they off isolation.
But we have no way to enforce that, correct?
There's no way we can do that because if they're living in a house with 9 people and they're sharing rooms, it's like some people are sleeping on the couch. There's no way to enforce that. We just have to educate them and then teach them how to clean, how to wash their hands. We send them masks to wear so that they can be protecting themselves and protecting their family.
Is there any way, Mr. Mayor, we can find a place where we can put these people in quarantine?
So we were fortunate enough, and I'll give you an example again with people facing homelessness, 130 people on any given day at Father Bill's Mainspring. We knew that that was going to be greatly impacted because this virus spreads in density when there's people, in a confined area. So the governor, I spoke to the governor, Charlie Baker, about homelessness. And if you have followed this, Brockton was #1 in terms of thinking outside the box, and that was using Perkins Park. Because of the state's efforts and the delegation, and I know Congressman Lynch made some calls as well, Lexington, Massachusetts was a regional hotel facility. We were able to bring over 30 Brockton residents that were positive, Mainspring residents, up to the regional hotel. Now we're sending some to Taunton, Massachusetts. I will tell you, I was a little dismayed when we reached out to the local hotels in Brockton. They wanted us to rent out the entire hotel for 2 months at a time, which financially we didn't need to do. But weeks ago, if not close to 2 months ago, we set up North Middle School, North Junior High in the gymnasium, and we already have Brockton High ready to go if need be. We can do that and get that going. So to answer your question, Counselor, we don't necessarily have a place to send them right away because, again, they would have to be positively confirmed. But I do know that the state has helped us, and I wouldn't hesitate to give them a call tomorrow if need be. But when I do speak to the nursing homes, they have made it clear when employees are positive, and I take their word on it. But I do know that there is a monitoring in place by the state, specifically with nursing homes, because again, that was a great impact here in the city of Brockton.
Well, exactly, and that's unfortunately it would be an emotional toll on those employees. But if we can't quarantine them, we're not going to beat this. Period. That's all the medicine, all the science tells us that. So if these people are going home into a house that has 7 or 8 people, there's almost no way you can clean up after yourself. You can do a lot of things, but you can't quarantine or isolate, in my opinion. And we're going to need to find, of course, there's $90 million now, Bob. We could probably rent out those hotels. So we'll just call Greg and tell him we need 90 million. But we'll get into that later. And as far as the HIPAA goes, once somebody passes away, the HIPAA goes away, correct? If somebody could answer that.
This is Megan.
Go ahead, Megan.
That's a question out there too, whether there are certain privacy laws that survive your life on Earth. And it's unclear. The HIPAA might go away, but as I mentioned to Councilor Thompson, that's not the only privacy consideration. If HIPAA doesn't cover something, which the city might not be a HIPAA covered entity, the Board of Health might not even be a HIPAA covered entity, but the city still has obligations relative to statutory privacy laws. And if they, I'm happy to research it. If they survive death or not, they may.
I would think if the mayor has the legal right and the governor to tell people to do certain things like wear masks and not work and not leave their house, I can't imagine they don't have the legal right to at least know. We need to know where these people are. And again, a heat map is, I can't believe that the state isn't putting these out. Our people need to know where these are happening, because we can't. One of the problems we've run into, and Mayor, you know it better than I do, we've had to have the police out, breaking up basketball games and soccer games. We've got parties going in the neighborhoods and people think, oh, it's not real. Until we show people where these are and they don't believe it's real, we need these tools. And Councilor Fowle, I couldn't agree more that there are some people that are going to be not good about this, but we're beyond that right now. We're at, how many deaths are we at, Mayor?
159.
159. And by the way, while I'm on that, how do we know exactly how many are from the nursing homes?
Well, the only way I could figure that out, quite honestly, is to calculate based upon the reported deaths from those nursing homes. John, I know we've talked about it, statistically a high percentage of the seniors that passed at the nursing homes. But again, we get the death count, but I do know that when I speak to Guardian, they had the first loss of life in St. Joe's and West Acres up in here in the ward, Tim. It's a high percentage, but it's not 100%. I'll be clear on that.
Right, and I can't imagine that the counts violate HIPAA. Would they, John?
No, but the problem is how they come in.
Sorry, I can't hear you, John.
We don't always know where the deaths are coming from. I am not the recipient of the information. I am given the information from somebody else. So I get a number from Evelyn from the information she gets, and I get a number at this time. Again, the Department of Public Health, good, bad, or indifferent, the fact is that they are the ones that provide the information to a lot of these things. Our information sometimes is basically garnered from the death certificates that come in.
And John, I understand that. We spoke about that. My frustration is with the state. The state should be telling us that. They can't expect us, when I say us, I'm talking about the team, and you've done the whole team of you have done a phenomenal job of where we are. But we are really number 2 in the state, Chelsea, us, Boston, whatever. You can play with numbers, but we can't fix a problem that we can't identify. And to say, oh, the whole city has the problem, that's not identifying the problem. Identifying the problem is helping us find out where it's happening so we can, number 1, educate, truly educate, and number 2, find those hot spots that we can fix. And if the state doesn't start giving us that information, we're going to have to find it somehow. And I know you can't do it. It's not up to you guys. We don't have the manpower for that, but we need that information. And again, do we need the people's names? No, of course not. But we need to know where they are and how they're catching the disease, because we can't fix that problem until we have that information. I mean, that's what the tracing is all about. If we can trace, why can't we trace where the deaths were? I'm very frustrated with the state on this, because they're asking us to be on the front lines. And again, I say us as the proverbial us. You guys are out there, and I've been trying to do my job by staying home, staying out of the way. But we can't fix a problem that we can't identify. And to just say there's a problem out there, everybody stay home, you can't educate people that way. They don't get it. So I'll let this go, but I'm very frustrated with the state on this, because, and again, John and I have had several conversations, and I don't believe we don't have the manpower to do that. to do the work. The work is done. They have the information. They need to share it with us. This is long beyond, I mean, I understand HIPAA and, you know, I want my personal health records to be private too. That's not what we're looking at. This is a global pandemic that is killing thousands and thousands of people. This is long beyond those rights of, because some of those people, they're not doing the things to take care of their neighbors and themselves that we need. This isn't somebody who smokes cigarettes and is killing themselves. This is somebody who, in some cases, is not wearing masks and not staying home. They're endangering other people, not just themselves. So HIPAA be damned if need be.
Thank
So,
you, Counselor.
thank you.
And we share, I know we share the same sentiments as well as a lot of our colleagues. So whatever we need to do on our end, I really think we have to, you know, find the root of the problem. But just to let counselors know, we have a few counselors that have questions. Next, we have Counselor Mendez, then by Counselor Rodriguez, and then we can go back to Counselor Cardoso and Thompson. They had follow-up questions. So, Counselor Mendez, you're next.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'll try to be quick because I know everybody has a lot of questions about this issue. And I think it's a great opportunity that we have everyone together so we can all be discussing this because it's a very important issue, especially for Brockton. I have a few questions. So the first one, and anybody can pretty much answer, whoever feels more like it. The first question is, if we have any written prepared plan to deal with this pandemic.
So I'll answer that. We do have pandemic plans. Unfortunately, not to this magnitude, right? This is something that we've never dealt with. The world hasn't dealt with. So we do plan for pandemics, but again, not to this degree. And we do have emergency dispensing site plans and other plans that relate to this. But so the answer is yes, we do have plans to deal with pandemics, but not to this degree.
Counselor, I wanted to just follow up on that. In terms of what was instituted at Brockton High School today, again, that was a plan that actually had been generated when I came in. Steve Hook said the city of Brockton has a pandemic plan utilizing the parking lot at Brockton High. That was more for drive-up distribution of medicine or shots. So we just modernized that. To my amazement, the AZF skating rink had been planned to be used as a morgue if need be. We haven't had to, thank God, go there, but there are refrigerated trucks at both Good Samaritan Medical Center and Signature Brockton Hospital. So we did have a plan. It had been generated a long time ago, but thank God for Steve. He had that information and we were able to minimize it and expand upon it to face the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you so much for that. The other question, maybe Troy could probably answer because it deals with the finances. So it's like, I'll just ask all the questions together and then you can just answer. So how much money have we allocated to this pandemic? How much have we spent and how much is there remaining until we get our funding?
So I'll take the questions together. We know that there will be federal funding assistance. And so what we're doing in terms of, because I'll answer the question first about what's available. Obviously, Steve Hook, I'll follow a point that he made. We don't budget for things like this, right? This is a once in a lifetime occurrence. So what we've been doing, we catalog all the expenses. I actually just checked the spreadsheet a little earlier today. In the aggregate, our expenses directly related to COVID response to date on the city side are roughly $300,000. I checked with Aldo Petronio and their expenses are roughly similar. That does not count the expense for roughly 5,000 computers that they purchased for students. Some of those may not come back and be cataloged as expenses. I anticipate our overall expenses to exceed $1 million. Much of that will be reimbursable by the federal government through the various funds that they're making available. But I would liken how we're cataloging those expenses, similar to how many municipalities dealt with the excessive snowfall in 2015, because there was relief available for that. And so, or some of the storms that we've had over the last 10 years where federal disaster assistance becomes available, because we're able to take those expenses and actually separate them from the operating budget. So the direct response to COVID will not make us go into a deficit for this year. And then as the assistance comes in, we'll be able to book that against those expenses. We have received approximately $200,000 direct grant for the Board of Health from the Commonwealth. And I'm actually working with our team internally this week to fill out some reports and get some information to the Board of Health by Friday to update them on how much has been spent against that. So each and every department, as they incur expenses, they provide them to me, and then we keep them cataloged in a separate spreadsheet. So we're following that very closely. I do anticipate, just based on what we're seeing nationwide in terms of trending, that this will last obviously well into next fiscal year. So this will be an impact that will be felt over a couple of fiscal years. In terms of the budgetary impact, because of the revenue challenges that the mayor mentioned, the overall impact financially will be over multiple fiscal years. So we are paying very close attention to that. But I do believe that our direct response costs will be able to be absorbed through the federal assistance that we're receiving. Did that?
In addition to that, Counselor, I charged all the department heads to keep track of every single penny, every single dime that we spend relative to COVID. We're going to seek reimbursement. Now, we know from past practices, you don't get dollar for dollar from the feds, and it takes a long time. An additional to that 200 grand, and I want to thank John McGarry for helping to get that 200,000 from the state. There's an additional 75,000 that John's been able to ascertain through DPH. They're going to do a citywide mailing in multiple languages. Right now, they're translating that. It was forwarded to them last week. They gave us an update today. It's going to hit every household in the city of Brockton. And also thanks to Superintendent Mike Thomas, what I asked Mike to do last week was work with us to come up with handouts at every single 10 of the site locations for lunch and breakfast. And again, we worked with Jess Hodges on the school side, and we provided documentation to talk about everything from washing your hands to social physical distancing to the mandatory curfew to the respective request to wear masks. Again, that's going to be in multiple languages, and it was started today to be handed out at the lunch program. But every single penny that the city of Brockton pays on the city side and school side, we're itemizing. I want to thank Mel and Marty Brophy and Troy for working with me on this, because we have to have a certain code attributed to that. But we are tracking that very, very diligently.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And also I wanted to know, do we know how much Brockton is going to be getting out of that $90 million that is coming to Plymouth County? Do we have any idea how much Brockton is going to get out of that?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify that, and there's two clarifications I'd like to make. Someone went on social media saying, what the heck kind of mayor do we have? He's lousy. The city of Brockton's only getting $841,000 from the feds. Let me make it clear. The city of Brockton had nothing to do with that. It's a formula, the CDBG grant formula. It's based upon a formula that the feds did. I'll take the 841,000. I'd like to have a lot more than that. We had no say in it. People said, well, why is the BRA involved? Because they administer CDBG grant funding. 841,000 is coming. I spoke to Karen Polito the other day. I've been waiting 3 weeks to sign the Fed contract that's then going to create the wire to be sent to the city of Brockton. That money is going to be distributed to residents in Brockton and businesses. I'm going to prioritize businesses that have not benefited through the PPP application. The 90 million that everybody's seeing on the news and in the media, let me express a little bit about that. I did a letter, a joint letter. I drafted the letter, but the town manager, Melissa Arrigo, in Plymouth concurred with me, and she wrote it on. I have great admiration and really appreciate the county officials. I was the Brockton representative to Plymouth County Advisory Board. Jim Harrington, former mayor, put me on there. I just resigned, and I put your colleague Susan DeCastro to join that board. My suggestion is this. I asked that the state delegation, the 3 reps and the senator have a Zoom call with me last week. They said, absolutely, Bob, we'll get on the call, and they did. The following day, I asked them to join me again with the county officials. It was Dan Pilata, the chairman of the county commission. It was Tom O'Brien, the treasurer. It was John Buckley, the registry of deeds. It was Matt McDonough, the register of probate. And I let everybody speak. I said, you can say what you want to say. But at the end of the day, when I need masks or when I need tents, I don't call Plymouth County. I call the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We don't get our Chapter 70, Chapter 90 funds from the county. We get it from the Commonwealth. Our Student Opportunity Act, we don't get from the county. We get it from the Commonwealth. So, people have thrown, oh, Brockton's going to get 20 million or 10 million if they take this money from the county. The feds have strict regulations on how you can actually get that money, number one. The county did apply, rightfully so, but the Inspector General and the Secretary Heffernan and Lieutenant Governor and Governor has asked them to sign the money. And it's a battle between the county and the Commonwealth. And I was very, very blunt. I'm a local official. I'm a mayor. I serve with the city councils. I serve with school committees. I want to get the best thing for Brockton from a financial standpoint going forward. And it's a battle. So to answer your question, Councilor, I don't know how much Brockton would get from that county dollar amount. I'm hoping that they give it back to the Commonwealth because Lieutenant Governor Polito and I have had conversations. They've helped us from increased testing to masks to PPPs. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but it is a battle between the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the county.
Thank you so much. And May, you did mention that some of the money we're going to be getting, it's going to be addressed to the small businesses, because I was also concerned about businesses that didn't get the federal funding for the PPP. So I just wanted to ensure that we had some funding allocated to them as well.
Absolutely. And I am also going to announce that I've been working diligently with the United Way. And it's a little premature to announce it, but there will be a fund coming up that everybody will be informed about in the near future. I have a weekly call with all the business administration, the small business administration on Friday, our friends in DC with the Chamber of Commerce. On Wednesday, Mary Waldron, OCPC, Downtown, Montello, Campello Business Associations joins me with NeighborWorks. And again, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the businesses that are in Brockton survive. Unfortunately, reality shows us that some of them will not. And it's just a sad commentary. It could be generational and they disappear. So I just think it's the right thing. And I mentioned this to my weekly call on all the local banks. If there is a Brockton business that applied for PPP in round 1 and didn't get it, and round 2 that didn't get it, that 841, we have to put them at the top of the line to give them some aid. Phyllis Ellis and the NAACP Brockton chapter has created a fund as well. I know BIC has created a fund. And, we owe it to the businesses and we owe it to the residents. And we'll be working again through the Charity Guild and Catholic Charities. We do that every day to give food out to the residents. But I share the same sentiments as you do, Counselor. I mean, we need to protect our small businesses and make sure that at least a high percentage of them come back to the city of Brockton.
And speaking about the business, do we have a written plan to deal with the health aspects when it comes to reopening the business?
We do not. I'll tell you, I was on a call just the other night, and a mayor in Everett wants to open up on a specific date. He wants casinos open. And I said, with all due respect, it's not date driven, it's data driven. Our numbers are still increasing. I will be having a pandemic consultant working for me, a retired doctor. I'll pass that on when it's executed, when the consulting agreement is executed. There is no specific drop dead date. I will tell you, I've already spoken to the city officials in terms of how we need to take precautions just at City Hall, ordering plexiglass, and it's going to be a whole different new normal. But the businesses themselves, someone contacted me today from a barbershop saying, I'm going to open up, it's May 4th. No, Governor Baker extended non-essentials to the 18th. But everything's on the table right now, councilors, in terms of business. And another simple thing is how we can show our love and support for the graduating seniors that missed out on a prom and missed out on a quote normal graduation. So the school committee, our colleagues that are duly elected like we are, and the superintendent, we have to think outside the box to be creative. And that comes back to your question, Council, in terms of what we need to do with businesses. The new normal is going to be at City Hall, I suspect, one way in, using one door in, and then a different door exiting out. And it's going to be limited in space. But until the numbers decrease or at least minimize in Brockton, we're not there yet.
Okay. Are we able to provide masks to everyone in the city of Brockton, especially this week that the governor stated that everybody starting May 6th should wear a mask? Can we do something like that if they can't afford to buy masks, to have a drive up where they can go and be able to get masks for those who can afford to be buying masks?
So Council, I have a meeting with Chief Manny Gomes, Brockton Police Chief, tomorrow. I will tell you, in the city of Cambridge and in Somerville, police cruisers have masks, and if they pull up, Mayor Curtatone shared with me that if they pull up, they're going to give out masks. The mayor of Boston said they don't have enough masks to do that. I know Steve Hook has been extremely generous. I call them the regular masks. They're just the surgical masks. The recommendation again is cloth masks as well to be used. So we have to look at every option in terms of an accounting of the hard numbers of masks, and distribute them wisely. I don't know, Steve, if you have a hard count you can share with us right now.
I do, Mayor. So right now we have, I don't know, about 6,000 masks in stock, so to speak.
Right, okay.
Not enough for every resident. And just keep in mind, you know, MEMA gives us masks for the first responders, not for residents, so to speak. So we'd have to come up with a plan to deal with that.
So I, just to comment, I know I spoke with counselors last week, and just to put everybody kind of in the, just to fill them in, the council as a whole is working together with our legislative council to put together an ordinance or an order to work with the orders coming, whether it's from the mayor's office or the governor, to enforce wearing masks in public once we start going back to the new normal. So this hasn't been finalized, but our attorney is working on it. And Mayor, I was going to fill you in on it, but I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but this is something that we're working on, and it will work with whatever orders come out of your office as well as the governor's. But I think it needs to be in the form of an ordinance, and this way, whatever expense for these masks could probably go in. We can get reimbursed for them, as well as overtime for police for enforcement, which I think we're going to need a lot of help with. So
Thank you, Council. I wasn't aware of that, and thank you to the entire council. I mean, every initiative that we can do going forward is going to be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Councilor Mendes, do you still have questions, or can we move on?
The final one. So I looked up the numbers in Quincy. They have 885 cases and 80 deaths, and then in Fall River, 601 total cases and 8 deaths. The question is, do we know why we're being hit so hard in Brockton? They're also largely immigrant populations that are also overcrowded. So just trying to get some understanding why we in Brockton are just being hit so hard with this pandemic.
I mean, I could just tell you, Counselor, because I've asked I'm not medically trained, I asked the doctors the same thing. I look at other gateway communities, Fitchburg, Haverhill, Quincy, Fall River, New Bedford, and why our numbers are so high. And the answer is, I mean, the virus is taken hold in the city of Brockton. Again, it's really decimated our senior population in the nursing home facilities. There's a lot of root causes. We have a dense community. A lot of people are living in the same type of residential dwelling. I think that a vast majority of Brocktonians are adhering to the health guidelines, but there are some folks, and it's disappointing and frustrating, that don't. When there was a 6-year-old's birthday party on the east side the other day, that's unacceptable. No doctor that I've spoken to or CEO of the hospital has an absolute certainty of why it's hit this way. I know John McGarry hears from me morning, noon, and night, asking the same type of questions. We don't actually know why that is, but it has taken hold. And I'll tell you, I had a conversation with someone the other day at the supermarket, and I had my mask on, and this gentleman didn't. And he said, I don't think that this is real. And I said at that time, well, 148 people have died. And that's a fact. So I don't have an answer for you on that. John, I don't know if you have any other information, but that's the best information that's been given to me from the health professionals from Brockton.
And I would concur with that. It's not any one reason. it's how our city is built. It's the work that our residents do. And it's the size of a lot of it has to do with the size of our families too in Brockton. And they pass from one to another. And everyone's got to really remember that this illness, you can have no symptoms from this illness and you can be infecting multiple people. So it's not even like you can say, oh, I'm gonna stay at home. You would not even know that you're sick and you can be out infecting people. That's why the masks are going to be a great aid in hopefully slowing this down. And the social distancing has been the drumbeat from the get-go. So
Thank you so much. But just to clarify, the numbers we're getting that everybody lives in Brockton is not just from our hospitals, and then they just happen to be counted from Brockton. They
correct.
do.
It's Brockton residents.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Mayor, and all the members of the council and the folks that are on the line with us. I'm going to go back and touch a little bit on the HIPAA. Again, full disclosure, I'm not a lawyer, but I was involved at Brockton Hospital back in 1996 when the HIPAA law was passed. And I spent several days translating that act itself into Portuguese, Spanish, and French. And it's actually interesting when you go to the Brockton Hospital, that translation is still up on the wall there, which is kind of interesting. But my concern is that, I mean, not a single day you tune in the television sets and you hear states quoting numbers. You know, so many African Americans are doing this, so many Hispanics are doing that. And if HIPAA is a federal law passed by the federal government, which means that all states are abiding by the same laws, how come some states are allowed to publicize numbers and yet Massachusetts, and we probably need it more than others, but Massachusetts somehow in our community is not allowed to share those numbers? That's the question for John or.
Can't hear you, John. Can't hear you.
It's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I mean, that's
HIPAA is not the common. HIPAA is not.
I understand that, Counselor, but I can only go by what I'm being told by the governor of Massachusetts.
Well, you know what? But the governor of Massachusetts cannot supersede the federal government and the federal laws. If the state of New York can go out and publicize numbers so that they can actually reach out, because the reason why some of us are asking for this information is for educational purposes. The mayor just quoted a few seconds ago that we've lost over 156 people, citizens or fellow residents here in the city of Brockton. I can tell you that over 50 Cape Verdeans have died from this disease. And I was just in conversation with our priest at Edith Stein just last week. He had 4 funerals on Friday and 3 more on Saturdays, and he's got quite a few of them lined up to do some more, to do later on this week. So it's killing a lot of people who are not necessarily in nursing homes, because I know those individuals that have died were not individuals that have died in nursing homes. So it's killing folks in the community. But at the same time, these individuals are surrounded by a ton of family members that are basically constantly passing this disease around. And that's why I actually don't see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to this thing in the city of Brockton, because for some odd reason, somehow the state and some of us are not necessarily getting the information that we need to in order to seriously put our foot down and see what we can do to help this out.
Counselor, can I make a comment? Way back in March, the mayor had a meeting with Congressman Lynch and a few, I believe Steve and John, you were in the room. And I asked the question, and I remember Congressman Lynch saying he was going back to Washington and he was going to find out. He said that they were much more lax on the HIPAA laws, but is there a way that we could, can we reach out through your office, Mayor, and see if he was ever answered that question? I did specifically ask him. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, no, I do remember that. And I also know that, Aina Presley is trying to change some federal law. I share the same frustration as former mayor and now Councilor Elijah Moses Rodriguez. I don't know what good reason the state has of not giving us that info. I mean, we're a minority majority community. I mean, I don't know why they're not giving that. It pisses me off, pardon my French. But I'm happy to call the congressman tomorrow morning. And as I said, I have a standing 2 p.m. Every Tuesday with a delegation. And I'm happy to do a letter signed by the entire council, the mayor. We can get the school committee. We can get everybody.
I think
It's
that would
power
be
in numbers. I'm happy to do it.
I would think that would be great, Mayor. I've already mentioned a collaboration with the vice chair and with the school committee. And I think we really need to do something from all three offices to send
Absolutely.
up to the state. But I did ask the question and I never was able, because then everything kind of blew up. But I remember Congressman Lynch saying he was going to look into it and he was going to Washington that following day or so. So thank you. Sorry, Council. I just wanted to, I remembered that and wanted to ask if there was
No,
something.
thank you, madam.
Go ahead.
And because I'm telling you, honestly, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we're always looking for a reason as to why we're not doing something versus why we should be doing something. My next concern is that I know we've spent a great deal of time talking about the nursing home clusters. But as I said earlier, I know for a fact that we've lost over 50 Cape Verdeans in this community. And those Cape Verdeans were not in nursing homes. So you're looking at almost a third of the population of the folks that we have lost from that specific community. And that's an alarming number. But at the same time, you look at, we know what happened actually in the Midwest with the meat processing places out in the Midwest. These were places though that basically were manned and hosted a ton of immigrants and minority workers who are probably not all up to par what goes on in terms of the line of prevention that we're talking about. But what kind of scares me a little bit is that we've got quite a few food processing places here in the city of Brockton. I have several messages that I've received from individuals who are very concerned with the fact that there are a ton of people working on these particular places, shoulder to shoulder with some individuals in some cases, not going through the social distancing or using, PPEs. I know we focus mostly on PPEs for the first responders, but nowadays, to be honest with you, the people who are in the front lines, producing food and stocking shelves and doing some of these other things are people in the front lines as well. To be honest with you, I have probably more to do currently with, the folks at, Stop and Shop or the folks at BJ's than I do with my own personal doctor, because, they're providing me food on a daily basis for myself and my family to go through. So that concerns me. But we've got several of these places that I have heard from credible individuals that there's some individuals who have tested positive or who are actually positive, in some cases with symptoms of COVID-19, who are still working shoulder to shoulder with some individuals out there. And that is concerning to me because, again, these individuals will go home and pass it on to that family, and that vicious circle will continue in our community. So that's why when we hear how, some of these other communities like Quincy's and some of these other places their numbers are not as alarming as Brockton, this is the reason why I believe the numbers are alarming, because we've got individuals who are continuously infecting, their families and their neighbors on a regular basis. And I'm not exactly sure, who, maybe if it's John or, somebody from DPH or something to basically get hold of some of these places and address this issue, because this is concerning and it's alarming. Because if we think that this thing is going to go away as it is going in some other places, our numbers are not getting any better. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better.
That concerns me too, Counselor.
And I'll share that information with you offline, both John and Mr. Mayor, so that we can kind of see what we can do in terms of addressing those issues, because it could become a hot spot. And before you know it, instead of nursing homes, we're talking about these food processing places.
We have responded since it started. I wish I knew where the speaker was on this so I could talk right in. We have responded to any phone call we have gotten from any business. I have sent out inspectors to any, even without, and usually they're anonymous, so I don't have anyone's name to use. So we follow up on all of the any concerns of any of the citizens about businesses. Not only are we available, but you can also, those people can also go to the state, there are state boards governing the businesses too, that they can file complaints with. So there's.
Right. I don't want to harm the businesses in the sense, but I want to make sure that there's some precautions being utilized in their workplace, because the individuals need the job and need to work, but at the same time, they need to safely work at these particular places.
If they are COVID positive, they should not be working. Period.
They are. I mean, I got a text tonight from a lady that's actually watching us right now, and that's why I brought up that issue, that these individuals are COVID positive.
No, they shouldn't be working. They should be in quarantine, in isolation. But again, I understand that people need to work, but you got to decide, what are you going to do? Are you going to continue possibly infecting other people?
Well, so the individuals that I in question, they're afraid of basically, so-called quarantine themselves or staying away from their workplace for fear of losing their job. People are being told, if you do not come to work, and I've heard this from nurses' aides, people working in nursing homes, and as well as these food processing places, that if you do not come to work, you will not have a job once this thing is done. So they're just petrified, and they're going to work sick in some instances, but it's happening more often than I care to understand, to be honest with you.
Council, I'll call you tomorrow morning. That's very, very disturbing. And unfortunately, I think it's reality, right? So I'll be happy to work with you, and we'll have Mr. McGarry assist as well. And, at the end of the day, we are charged a fiduciary duty to protect our citizens, the people that elect us. So happy to work with you, Moses, on that. That's unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
All set, Counselor. Okay. Counselors, anybody that hasn't already asked a question? Nope. So we're going to go back to Counselor Cardoso, then Thompson, and then Farwell. Counselor Cardoso.
Okay, so everything that we've talked about goes back to needing this data. Everything from what Counselor Cruz said, from what Moses just said, Counselor Rodriguez just said, we need to have this data. And what Councilor Mendez said, as far as these other cities and towns that have lower numbers than us, we need to collect this data so that we understand, what is happening in Brockton. I can tell you one thing, a lot of it has to do with knowing the population that we serve and being culturally aware of what's going on. There's a lot of stigma around this in the Cape Verdean community. I can speak to that. And so some folks are they continue to go to work while sick. Okay, that's why I asked about the educational piece in the nursing homes, because I feel like we should use our political powers, even if we can't legally do anything, to be kind of oversight for some of this stuff. There's so many moving parts. And again, we're all learning. This is all new for all of us. But if like the mayor said, we're anticipating another wave, we have to work together and be prepared. We have to, the task force is going to be important. Us council folks are going to be important to bring information to the mayor's office about what we're hearing in our wards and our communities. And we have to work together to make sure that we're getting information out. I said this from day one, we needed information in different languages, because I understand our community. Not all of them are on Facebook. Not all of them are looking at the website. Not all of them even have a computer. So we needed to do a mass mailing, a robocall, or a reverse 911. We need to disseminate information. One, we need to collect data, because we need to understand where we're getting hit the hardest so that we can intervene. We have a responsibility, okay, to use whatever political abilities that we have, regardless of any laws that the state has, to be able to protect our citizens. As far as the demographic data looking badly, on us, we have to forget about that. Health disparities existed in the city before this even hit, and now it's even worse. So we need to address that. My answer to that, it is what it is. We have a large immigrant community. We have a large community of people who don't speak English as their second language. So we have to work with what we have. And what Councilor Rodriguez is talking about, we see it every day. We go to the supermarkets, we see people with no masks or no gloves or touching things or putting things back or whatever. So there's a lot of work to be done. There are a lot of moving parts, but again, we need to figure out where this is happening, what can we do? And I have a question for Evelyn. So Evelyn, the data that you're collecting now, you're essentially collecting data right now. You're calling people to do contact tracing. You're asking them these questions. You have their names and their addresses and their date of birth. Do we have the tools, John can answer as well, to gather that information? I can tell you right now, working in Boston, we have relaxed so many HIPAA laws to do the work that we need to do to gather information. I'm testing employees, I'm calling them from home on my cell phone, which we never did. We're working from home at times on systems that are not protected per se. So we've relaxed, and the Secretary of State has relaxed a lot of the HIPAA laws. We didn't have a system in place in Boston to gather information on employees. We were using spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets to gather the data. So there are things that I feel that we can do to collect this data. There are death certificates on the folks that die. There are different ways to collect this information now, so we know what we need to do. And if we don't have the tools now, we should really be looking at these tools to put them in place so that we can collect this information, because it's important. So you have 8 nurses, with Evelyn, 9 nurses that are doing this. There should be a way for them to input this information in some type of spreadsheet so we have a general idea without violating HIPAA laws on what we're facing in the city. That's just my suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. And I'm just going to comment again. I mean, we've all heard a lot about this virus. We've all researched things, but research has shown countries that were hit the least were ones that were prepared and that were able to accumulate the information and kind of go out and quarantine people that have been affected. So collecting this information is really important. So I know we all share the same frustrations, and I hope we'll be able to get answers. Counselor Thompson and then Fowler.
Thank you again, Madam President. And I'll be quick. So I think both Councilor Cardoso and Councilor Mendez spoke exactly discussing that balance between disclosure of the ethnicity data leading to prejudice versus that information leading to better education for that community so that they can better protect themselves and their families. So just quickly, not only is us not collecting data, I just believe that's opposite of what the law requires. And just quickly, referring to the CMR, the Code of Massachusetts Regulation, says cases or suspected cases of the disease is listed, and novel coronavirus being one of them, shall be reported by physicians and other healthcare providers to the Board of Health in the community where the case is diagnosed or a suspected case is identified. And when available, full demographic information must be included in each report. Additionally, local CMR, again, local boards of health are authorized to obtain, upon request from healthcare providers and other persons subject to the provisions, medical records and other information local boards of health deem necessary to carry out its responsibilities to investigate, monitor, prevent, and control dangerous diseases to the public health. When it comes to our ability to publish this information, I go to MGL chapter 111, 104. If a dangerous disease to the public health exists in a town, the Board of Health shall use all possible care to prevent the spread of the infection and may give public notice of infected places by such means as their judgment may be most effectual for the common safety. And when it speaks to the confidentiality, because again, number one is I believe that HIPAA does not apply, but even there's a confidentiality language. All confidential personally identifying information shall be protected by persons with knowledge of this information, except when necessary for the Commonwealth or local jurisdictions' disease investigation, control, treatment, and prevention purposes. So I just, whenever we are hearing from the feds or from the state of them not providing this information to us is in direct contradiction to the laws currently on the books. And we must find an answer to this if we're going to provide information to our citizens to better protect them during this COVID pandemic. Again, thank you for your time.
Counselor, I welcome that suggestion. I will explain to you, and Mayor Rodriguez knows this in his tenure. The Board of Health is not equipped. The City of Brockton Board of Health is not fashioned in a proper way. That was the whole basis of the last legislative session when we were trying to do a modification relative to having a commissioner. Mr. McGarry stepped in before after Mr. Tataglia passed away, and an administrative assistant was the health officer. To only have one health nurse, thank God again that the 8 school nurses are helping us. So I share your frustration, Jeff, I really do. And as I said before, anything that we can do together collaboratively to put pressure on the state, I welcome it. I think we need to. And again, they'll listen to more powers and numbers than just me or just you. So let's do it, and we'll keep banging the drum. And again, I'm going to mention it to Michelle, to Mike, to Claire, and to Jerry tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. All set, counselors? Counselor Farwell.
All right, I'll finish up by saying I've heard a lot about statistics. Every single day, with the exception of Saturday and Sunday, sometimes I get it Sunday night, Mass DPH publishes information from their COVID dashboard. That I'm holding it up. I don't know if it's visible to the rest of you on the council. This happens to break down cases, hospitalizations, and deaths by race and ethnicity. There is an entire list of every nursing home in the state, how many cases they've had, how many deaths they've had. You can break it down by county. You can break down the number of cases and deaths by community. What they don't do is give you the race and ethnicity of all of the people in Brockton who may have had COVID. And I understand that we live in a data-driven society, but I don't know what that would change. I don't know if John McGarry and Mayor Sullivan or Mr. Hook would do anything different. We're here to protect every single person in this community. Now, can we do better disseminating information in different languages? Absolutely, and I'm in favor of that. But I also want to close by saying we haven't mentioned personal responsibility, and I was just shocked by hearing Councilor Rodriguez say that there might be a business in town and the person who owns the business is saying, you come into work whether you're sick or not. How irresponsible. That's the type of business I don't want in this community. You would put other people at risk by saying to someone, you come to work whether you're sick or not, and then go home and possibly infect others. I mean, I think that's another component we've got to look into if we're going to start enforcing a lot of regulations and digesting a lot of statistics. We've got to factor in the personal responsibility. What do each of us as individuals have to do to cooperate and be part of the solution? Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could, Madam Chairman, I just want to give a quick example. I got a lot of complaints several weeks ago for the Dairy Queen on Ash and Belmont in terms of social physical distancing. And I love Dairy Queen, right? I love the Blizzard with crushed M&Ms. But let me tell you something. I drove by and I agreed with that. Those people that concerned, and I reached out to John, and he reached out to the owner and expressed our grave concerns, and even suggested a police detail might help. And the gentleman decided to close up shop, at least temporarily, right? That was his choice as a business owner, but he understood that there was a great risk to the general public if certain parameters weren't adhered to. So listen, I appreciate these two resolves. I think they're important. I don't think the conversation stops now. It needs to continue. And as conversations I've had, with Tina and Jeff, and last week, Michelle Dubois and Shirley, like, if we don't come together on this, I only speak English, right? So when I go on the Cape Verdean radio show or the Haitian radio show where I talk to all the Haitian pastors, I'm looking for everybody's help on this to spread the word. And at the end of the day, if we don't do that, we're going to be failing the community that we represent. So I applaud this. And I just want to publicly again thank John, because John McGarry didn't need this headache. He's retired, but he stepped up and he's helped me quite a bit. And same thing with Steve Hook. You know, when Bill Carpenter hired him, you know, he never expected this. So we're in this together. And I will say that it's testing us as a community, but we're going to overcome this. And you know, we need to work together as elected officials to figure out the next course when we do get through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, and you're right, we're in this all together. So thank you to yourself and to John and Steve and Evelyn, and thank you for all that you're doing. We support you, and thank you, Troy. You're on here with us, so thank you. We really have to work together, and we say that constantly, but we're actually practicing it. So thank you. And our counselors, I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Favorably.
A motion's been made and
Second.
properly seconded to recommend numbers 5 and 6, to vote on numbers 5 and 6. Madam Clerk, please do the roll.
Counselor Azak,
Yes.
Counselor Cardoso,
Yes.
Counselor Farwell,
Yes.
Counselor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Counselor Mendez,
Yes.
Counselor Cruz,
Yes.
Counselor Ianieri,
Yes.
Counselor Nicastro,
Yes.
Counselor Thompson,
Yes.
Counselor Lally,
Yes.
all in favor.
The resolves go back favorably to the full city council. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, everybody.
Counselors, does anybody have need any moments of recognition,
Chair, this is-
personal recognition?
This is John McGarry. speaking.
All right.
May I have-
Oh,
may I-
yes, Ms. John,
may I-
yes, go ahead.
May I be allowed to speak on a personal matter?
Yes, yeah.
This, I did not, and I really hadn't thought about this, but I'm hesitant to give this information now, because I don't want anyone to think that the council, because they questioned me, is scaring me off. But when I took this position with the mayor, it was with the understanding it was going to be for maybe 3 or 4 months. But due to the intense work schedule that has gone on, my personal health has been failing. And at the insistence of my family, I have given the mayor my notice. Friday will be my last day in this position. I have underlying health issues that have been exacerbated because of the work that we've been doing, and with deep regret, I won't be able to continue on in this position any longer.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for actually stepping in. We appreciate you being there. And of course, you need to take care of yourself. That's number one. So we all understand that. And thank you for what you've done. I hope, is there somebody in the department that you feel is prepared that you could have?
Madam Chairman, I'll jump on that. John shared this with me about 2 weeks ago, and the gentleman that he is, he stuck around, and we appreciate everything. And I said to him, hey, your family first, your health first, John. And without, without your help and your guidance, we would be in a very dire situation than we are. I've been working diligently on this. It's premature as a personnel matter to express it, but we will have someone that's going to be filling executive role. I also publicly announced earlier I will be having a consultant, a doctor that's going to be helping on pandemic as well. So I just want to thank John for everything he's done, his friendship, his leadership, his guidance. You know, he was an esteemed city councilor and a councilor at large just recently. So thank you again, John. You've been a godsend. Thank you.
Thank you, John, on behalf of the city council as well. So thank you. Nobody would ever imagine this, this was going to happen. I had a conversation with a few of my colleagues last week, and I'm like, I remember, the beginning of March, we were all, looking forward. We were finally getting some funding for our schools. Nobody ever thought we would be here right now. So when you say we're all in this together, we're all in this together. So there are things that are important, and health and family are number one. So we stand with you on that. Counselors, I know Counselor Mendez, you have your hand up. What would you?
Yeah, I just want to say it's Nurses Appreciation Week. So now more than ever, I just want to say really thank you so much, John, for everything you've done for us in our city, for being out there, to Evelyn, to our Counselor Cardozo, for really being there in the front line, and all of the nurses out there. So I just want to say thank you so much for them.
Thank you, Counselor. Yes, thank you to all the nurses out there, all our healthcare workers. Counselor Cardoso.
I was just gonna thank John. Now I'm like sad.
Oh. Well,
thank you, John, for your service. I know that you came in at like the worst time ever. I can't even imagine. So I just want you to know I appreciate you and what you've done, and God bless you. And I pray for good health for you and your family, okay? Happy Nurses Week.
Thank you.
Counselor Cruz.
Thank you. I had something else I wanted to say, but John's been a longtime friend, and I can't thank him enough for what he's done for the city. I can't imagine Mayor Sullivan, if he didn't have somebody like that that he could trust and knew had a long-term relationship with, we would be much worse than we are. So John, take care of yourself. Once the social distancing is done, I'll see you at the Cape Cod Cafe, and I'll buy you another retirement drink. And I actually would just wanted to say, if all of you could keep Senator Brady in your thoughts tonight, a longtime friend of the city of Brockton, his brother Bob, former Avon selectman, passed away today. So our thoughts and prayers go to the Brady family.
Oh, wow. Yes, I didn't realize that. Our thoughts are with them. They've we all know them, and wow, that's sad news that we're hearing right now. Well, thank you, counselors, and we will keep the Brady family in our prayers. And that with no further business, I did want to, tomorrow, Cinco de Mayo, and I do have my 17-year-old who I would like to wish a happy birthday on a happier note. And so happy birthday to my Georgina. But counselors, have a good evening, and we will continue the discussion. Have a good night. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned.